Hello, RSA conference community. Thank you again for joining us for another event of Innovation Showcase. RSA conference is committed to supporting and amplifying innovation. We want our community members to hear from the companies that are developing novel approaches to attack the complex problems our industry faces. Over the last 2 years, we've been taking a tour around the globe, stopping in different cities each month to introduce you to some of the deal makers that identify and nurture these entrepreneurs. Today, RSA Conference's Innovation Showcase is co-hosted with Momentum Cyber, and we'll be discussing data security posture management. The program will open with a brief discussion with our illustrious panelists, followed by pitches from our 2 up-and-coming startups, and each of those entrepreneurs will get Q&A from our panelists. So let's get started. First, you may ask, what is DSPM? Well, according to Gartner, DSPM provides visibility as to where sensitive data is, who has access to the data, how it's being used, and what the security posture of the data store application is. It's a broad definition, and the space has changed a lot over the last decade. So I'd like to start with just turning to our partner and founder and managing director of Momentum Cyber, Dino, to briefly introduce himself and then illuminate for the audience the evolution of data security posture management and what's changed and why. Dino?
Thank you, Cecilia. Yes, as she mentioned, so I'm one of the founders and MDs at Momentum Cyber. We're a 100% cybersecurity focused advisory firm working on deals of all shapes and sizes, capital raise, M&A. But we're here to talk about data security. So let's kind of turn our sights to that area. So as Cecilia mentioned, I mean, DSPM is probably the term that's most in vogue today, right? DSPM, DDR. We wanted to focus really on the evolution of the space. And the primary reason for that is I think that the data security market is getting attacked in many different ways, and it always has been, right? So when you think back to the days of DLP, right, with Digital Guardian and Symantec and ForcePoint going at it for a number of years, and that was really when you thought about kind of data security, some folks thought about it through that lens. When you think about data discovery, data classification, the days of Bolden James and Titus and others that really were just focused on what data do you have, where is that data, is that sensitive data, how do we actually classify and understand the type of data that we have. There's the folks that used to approach it more from folks like the Veras and Seclors and others. So I'd say there's been many attempts at grappling with this data problem for quite some time. I think more recently, when you look at what's been happening, whether it's in the DSPM space, as Cecilia mentioned, or I'd say kind of one step before that would be kind of the CSPM space. So when you think about cloud, and then really there's vendors in that space that are more focused, I'd say, on that infrastructure control layer as opposed to that data layer. So really looking at configurations and looking at, it's almost like the containers within which you're storing the data is kind of their focus. But I think what makes the DSPM world really interesting is having a platform that just begins and ends with the data, right? Where is it going? Who has access to it? Of course, there's configurations that might be in the cloud, might be configurations of applications. And then also when you detect some kind of an issue, and it's not just you have a configuration setting that's incorrect and you want to make a modification to it, but when there's an active threat that's happening with the data, whether it's going somewhere it shouldn't or somebody has access to it that it shouldn't, what's that kind of response and recovery element as well, right? So the next gen players that we're seeing today that are tackling these problems are really more focused on the latter part of that problem. Yes, there's elements of discovery, classification, DLP-like capabilities that I think are baked into these platforms. But the newer kind of data-centric approach is the reason why we've seen investments in this space more than quadruple. From 2018, there was about $500 million invested in the data security space. In 2022, even in a year that's considered a down year, there was about $2 billion that was invested in the space. So that was the primary reason why we wanted to focus on the evolution of data security, and excited to have this discussion with the panelists. And then, of course, hear from 2 great companies that are tackling the problem in slightly different ways. But again, really in that kind of next gen world of thinking about it from a data first perspective.
Thank you, Dino. That actually lays a great foundation for us to have this discussion. Let's turn to Greg. Can you also just take a moment to introduce yourself and then share some thoughts on how data security interweaves with all the CISO's security management posturing.
Sure. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Happy to. And first, thank you to RSA and Momentum for having me. Really excited about this discussion. Should be a good one. So my name is Greg Dracon. I'm with 406 Ventures. We're an early stage venture capital firm with about $1.5 billion under management, focused primarily on Series A investing in three core areas: cybersecurity, which is the practice area I lead, but we also have teams on data and cloud, which do give us visibility into the data security problem we're going to talk about, as well as digital healthcare. So with that, I think it's a really, really important topic. DSPM is kind of the acronym of the day, but I think there are a lot of blurred lines. And as Dino said, evolution is the word Dino used, which is a really good one. I've been in security investing for almost 2 decades. We've always been focused on protecting the data, whether it's endpoint, whether it's network, whether it's identity and access management. Everyone's tried to stop data from moving where it shouldn't move. Now we're looking at the crown jewels of a company and trying to figure out how to know which data to protect and how to protect it. So I do think it plays into a CISO's playbook and really touches every piece of the stack, because you have to classify well. You first discover, classify, but then you have to touch those other aspects of network and endpoint to make sure it's going to the right people and places. Further, I think there's another category that is a little blurry here, is around asset management. As we know, we have to understand what we need to protect. That's kind of the step one in every security framework. One of those assets that people are starting to talk about is data. So you've got your endpoints, you've got your identities, but you also have data. So I think we have a lot of different categories colliding. So I'm really excited to hear from Dig and Flow today and have a discussion around how they're going to protect data, knowing that they're touching so many different elements of this pie.
I know there's a lot of pie here to touch. And I do think that data in particular is the part of the crown jewels. So Mark, you've heard Dino talk about the evolution, and Greg share some thoughts on how data security management is touching all different parts for the CISO's playbook. It's a really interesting and novel space, and there's seems to be so many different kinds of approaches to this. But the question for me to you is, as we're moving to the cloud with the large vendors that are already in that space, can you share with us how you imagine the space evolving? Can it be a monolithic, winner take all, or is it still going to need data specialists, and why? And start off though at the beginning, just giving a little background on yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, Cecilia. So my background, a lot of my career has been spent in the data security space. Today, I'm one of the co-founders of Acrew Capital, and we're a multi-stage firm. We invest anywhere from first money in through pre-IPO across a couple of funds. We have a little bit over $1 billion under management. We focus on 4 areas: fintech and consumer, but then also data and security. And data and security is where I spend pretty much all of my time these days. Prior to turning to the dark side and becoming a VC, I spent a little over a decade at Imperva. And a big part of our business was in data security, database activity monitoring. So I feel like I have sufficient scars in the data security space to say what I'm about to say, which it is difficult. One of the things I think about data security, it's very sensitive. People and in business functions need access to data. A lot of times there are all kinds of other different challenges that are not security challenges with data. Do I have the right data? Is it clean? Are there conflicts? And so a lot of the people who work with it spend a lot of time on that, and it can be very frustrating. So I think all of security is sensitive to things like false positives or denying access when it shouldn't be denied. But in particular, I think in data, because of some of the other frustrations around data, it seems like hypersensitive. So that is one of the things I think makes it particularly challenging to do it as a generalist. So I think there's a lot of speculation that the bigger platforms, whether they're cloud platforms or maybe CSPM platforms or something like that, some more general security platform is going to be somehow the overall monolithic winner. I would say I'm a little skeptical of that. Traditionally, data security has been a very difficult space, and the winners in that space tend to be specialists, people that come from specific data security backgrounds with specific focus. My guess is that's probably what will happen here. I think that will parrot what I think is probably broadly true in enterprise security for many years. Best of breed has been, what a lot of the enterprises choose in really almost any domain, but I think in particular in the data security domain. So I'm really interested to hear from these two companies today, and maybe some of the other points of view from the panelists about that. What specifically about the cloud or about the broader DSPM space is challenging, and things like how do you get started, how do you avoid the pitfalls that that maybe some other data security products have run into in the past, which is disrupting the flow of business.
I actually really like that. I'm tempted to start the conversation to go ahead and turn to our startups here, but I wanted to just flip back to Dino just for a second. If you just want to address any of Mark's points, especially about the obstacles that are faced today, and if there's any other points that we should touch on before we actually showcase the two startups.
Yeah, I think the only other addition I have is when you think about some of the driving forces on, who wins, right? Is it these, large monolithic players that, maybe are, what I would consider, either pivoting into the space or, adding additional capabilities to an adjacent market. That's one force, right? Then the other is really just the center of expertise, right? Are you coming at it from, a background like Mark's, for example, where you really are thinking, data first at all levels, right? You're not just talking about one element of it. You're not talking about just infrastructure or just cloud. I think that might be a limitation with some of the vendors that are out there today that are, trying to move into the sector. And then there's, I guess, the last piece that is highly relevant, especially for 2023, is just consolidation, right? The pendulum typically swings between that best of breed and best of suite. And sometimes you have folks that are looking for individual solutions to tackle individual problems. And I think one of the challenges that the data security folks will need to overcome nowadays is making sure that there's enough of that capability and that suite of capabilities built into that platform so that it really can be the place where you go and you understand whether that's permissions or classification of the data or understanding where is it flowing kind of across the entire enterprise, maybe not just limited to one or two specific areas that you're looking at. So can you get enough of a critical mass of functionality and capabilities into the platform where people won't maybe compromise on the level of security or resiliency as it relates to data security and decide to go with one of these larger, monolithic type players that are more generalist instead of specialists. So I think there's going to be opposing forces as it relates to that driving force of consolidation today. Will that be enough to cause issues for some of these players? I mean, TBD. I don't think it will be the case, but obviously want to hear more from the companies that we have coming up here. But I think that last consolidation piece is a valid point, because when you think about kind of CISOs opening up their wallets and really having that budget dedicated to the solution that you're bringing to the table, you just want to make sure that it's not viewed as yet another tool that they need to use, on top of what they already do. So anything you can do to eliminate maybe some of the other tools that they're using, or making sure that, this really is viewed as the platform that they would go to first and foremost, as opposed to just one of many. I think that'll also, support some of these data-centric players.
Excellent. Well, actually, I think that is a great lead-in. And having seen the dry run of these pitches, I can tell you that I think you'll all be pleasantly surprised and very engaged in what they're trying to do. So let's go ahead and get started with our first entrepreneur. Please welcome Dig Security CEO, Dan Benjamin. Dan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dan, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dig Security. Dig Security is a cloud data security company, helping organizations protect data across their AWS, Azure, GCP, and Snowflake environments. We're pioneers of data security posture management and coined the term data detection and response. Dig is a team of 50 employees around the globe who raise almost $50 million, and all of the founders are second-time founders selling companies to Mimecast, Luna, and CA Technologies. Now, what we do here as Dig is we help organizations answer three main questions all around data. What data do we even have across our clouds? How is that data being used? And of course, how do we protect that data from data exfiltration, ransomware, and compliance breaches? Now, if you kind of think about this from a mindset of an attacker, cloud data stores are always the actual target for an attack. That's where you can actually make monetary value from attacking an enterprise. But that's also the only place today in the public cloud that lacks a dedicated security solution to protect it. We have EDRs to protect our VMs. We have NDRs to protect our networks, but we don't really have a DDR solution to protect our data. And that's exactly what we did here at Dig. We built a data security platform that helps organizations protect data in the multi-cloud era, from the moment data gets created in the cloud until it gets deleted. And of course, everything starts with full data asset discovery. We're able to find any type of data store that lives in your cloud, whether it is PaaS solutions like an RDS and an Azure SQL, whether it is IaaS solutions. So if someone decides to boot up a VM, install MongoDB on it, we'll be able to find it. And of course, databases as a service like Snowflake and Atlas. We find all of those automatically. And then we bring context to the actual information. How is data being used? By whom? How is data flowing inside the organization? Where do we have PII or PHI or PCI data? Where do we have sensitive data just to us or regulated information? Where do we have data access permissions, data sovereignty issues, data exposure? Eventually, where do we have data risk across our environments? And the combination of kind of these first two columns is what Gartner